So this is our third and final step of our 3 simple steps to teaching God's words to your children using the classical model. And that is building wisdom through mentorship. In 1 Corinthians 11:1, Paul admonishes his audience by saying, "Be imitators of me, even as I also am of Christ." Ideally, we would actually be able to coach our students, and this is usually older students, by the way. This is not 5-year-olds. This is more in the 15-year-old kind of range. But if we're going to coach our students, ideally we would do that in a real world environment where they're dealing with something. We say, hey, what does God's word say? Here's how we can interact with that. Let's talk about that. The ideal would be something like mission trips or service projects, or as they're interacting with real relationships, for us to coach them through those. But we can also add situations that might not otherwise be possible. For example, if a student wants to talk about how to deal with persecution, we don't necessarily need to throw them into a situation where they're dealing with a malevolent state that is trying to crush Christianity. No, we can actually bring to their attention literature on that subject, right? We can actually say, hey, here is a book about Jim and Elizabeth Elliot, for example, going in to talk to the Wadani Indians, right, in the 60s. We can bring in literature through the Gates of Splendors, or what I believe that one is called. There's other ones, Diet Iman, things we couldn't say, that she talks about how they dealt with the Nazi occupation of the Netherlands and how they dealt with that situation as a believer, right? There's stories, there's literature we can bring to our students, and we can mentor them through these opportunities and help them to see how to apply biblical truth in those situations. Simulations can be another thing that is very, very helpful. If you have a simulated environment that you're able to bring students into, you can help them to be able to see how to actually do certain things in those simulations. Check out the resources we have on this page that talk about the various ways that we can actually mentor and coach our students, our older students, through using, applying, and sharing the gospel and God's word to others. Now, if your students are wanting to share God's truth with others, maybe through media or preaching or teaching or any of those other things, there's a great tool that can be used for that, and that is the 5 canons of rhetoric. And those are invention, which is where you come up with something to say; arrangement, how you arrange what you're saying; elocution, maybe the stylistic elements that you're using to make that very approachable for people who are listening to it; and then memory, which is, again, the process of memorizing the content that you're going to be sharing; and then finally, delivery, which has to do with how you actually give that material to someone else. So check out, again, the resources we have on this page. Thanks so much for watching these videos on how to teach your children God's word using the classical model.